All right, welcome everyone. This is your crossover episode for brought to you by Big Banter for the Illinois game in Minnesota. We are the Sky U Pod, and we are joined by Austin from the Illinicast. Um, Austin, I got to start out with this. Illinois was my preseason Big Ten West champ. I don't think anyone's more disappointed outside the state of Illinois than I am in how the season has gone so far for the Fighting Illini.
I know they've made a lot of people look like fools,
Yeah,
and I look at this team, the coaching staff, and there have been some miscues along the way. Obviously, with the record that Illinois has at 3-5, so I just view this season as kind of a lost cause. I think that Brett over valued his own talent that he had, and I feel like that's kind of led us to where they are at right now. They didn't hit the portal too hard. They thought their offensive line was going to hold up, and quite frankly, it just did not. So that's kind of the big time struggle that Illini fans are seeing because you have the portal, you have options to add talent at all times, and it just did not happen for the Illini.
yeah. Well, the Gophers have had plenty of struggles as well. We're on a little bit of a bounce back, but we'll start with this. Max, who was one of our co-hosts who couldn't be here tonight, he actually wanted us to throw this question out to you, just because the last couple years, especially, Illinois has kind of had our number. They're always been viewed since Bielema's got there, at least, that it's going to be a tough game, uh, you know, physical game. So he was just curious, what is your view? And you don't have to give us any props, or don't feel like you got to have pressure to talk us up, but what is Illinois' view of Minnesota on a yearly basis when you play us in the West?
I mean, going back before Brett Bielema, PJ Fleck was kind of the standard of what Illinois could look like because PJ Fleck has a lot of Illinois connections recruiting wise. He has a program that is pretty much the Big Ten West kind of identity of run the ball hard, play some tough defense, and maybe get a playmaker or two, and that can change the entire complexion of what a season can look like. So that's kind of the viewpoint that Illinois fans had PJ Fleck before Brett Bielema got in. Then, whenever Brett Bielema came, they said, "Okay, we got the true standard bearer guy that's won a lot at Wisconsin." So they kind of shifted their view to yes, this is what we kind of have to be with our identity. Then whenever Illinois and Minnesota actually played, I mean, Brett Bielema's undefeated against Minnesota at his time at Illinois, so that's kind of a notch in the cap for Brett Bielema and Illini fans, but this year's a little different. So it's a little bit complex on how we view this game and how we view Minnesota because Minnesota is 5-3 this year. They can be pretty solid. They're pretty solid in the Big Ten West. They can play in Indianapolis as well. So Illinois, they are the true underdogs in this game with how they played this year.
Yeah. We'll start with Illinois' defense. Just a couple questions for you. I look at their D line. I was so high on coming into this season, and not that they haven't been okay. It's just I look at the numbers that stand out as just Illinois currently got the 85th rushing defense in the country. Um, just you've watched them a lot more closely than we have. What's really been the main issue with that in general of why they're not at least closer to the standard that they seem to set last year?
I think a lot of it has to do with the production from the outside linebackers this year. Seth Coleman has had some flashes this year, and I feel like Gabe Yakis moving into the interior of the defensive line helps out a lot. But the big time issue for me is just that Jerzon Newton, whenever he's not playing like he won't in the first half, there hasn't been that next guy step up, and there's been some injuries with Keith Randolph as well throwing in there. So I think those are the three issues on why the running defense hasn't been as stout as it was last year.
Sure. Should
Yeah, Austin, I guess I'm kind of veering from the defense maybe a little bit here. But like in terms of like, Brett Bielema and kind of the identity, we saw him at Wisconsin. He always had a stout Wisconsin defense. Um, what are your views on him, and do you like him as a coach? Do you think this defense and maybe this offense have taken steps in the right direction? We saw last year, Illinois was just knocking on the door to get a West title. It didn't happen. And like Kurt said, we thought that they may be, at the top, this year. So, what are your thoughts on him, and do you think that he can take this team to the next level?
Brett Bielema is the best Illini coach since John Malkovich in the 80s. And I know that's not a high standard. Ron Zook had flashes of '07. Ron Turner had a flash of 2001. And I view Brett Bielema as the guy that can lead Illinois to some consistency. It's just, what does that consistency look like? Is it 7 to 6 wins every year, or is it 6 to 5 wins every year? I think Illinois still has 5 wins on the schedule, and you could possibly get a couple more in this bout with Iowa coming up and Minnesota coming up. So I think Brett has all the tools in the world to build a successful program. I think he just needs to figure out his offensive coordinator a little bit. He needs to self scout a little bit better. So a lot of it has to do with the minutia, but a lot of that minutia can add up and become major problems for a season like we've had so far at 3-5. So I have faith that he's going to get it done. He has a lot of young secondary pieces that are going to fit in really well with Aaron Henry's defense going forward. And then offensively, it just all comes down to what's your offensive line. I like Caden Fegan as a running back, but we'll get to the offense a little bit later. But going back to your original question, I think Brett is the guy that's going to lead Illinois to a promised land, whatever promised land that is for the likes of Illinois. It's not so much like Georgia and Alabama, but it should be a New Year's Six game, maybe every once in a while, maybe a football playoff, like rarity kind of thing, but
Right.
always being in that bowl picture or that upper echelon bowl picture, I feel like is where Illinois should belong with Brett Bielema whenever he really gets this thing going.
Okay. That makes sense. And then, so kind of sticking with the defense here, do you see this step back this year as more of just a loss of talent? I mean, you guys had a few pieces drafted into the NFL last year. So do you see it more of just a loss of talent and just maybe a little bit of a learning and rebuild year for that side of the ball, or do you have any questions about the D coordinator right now?
Aaron Henry, I feel like he will get the job done. I feel like he's done a great job recruiting talent, even with Ryan Walters being gone. Losing Sidney Brown, losing Devin Witherspoon, losing those guys, it takes a toll. And
Yeah.
I think that having so many freshmen play big time roles in the secondary is a tough ask of those guys. They're learning week to week, so I'm very excited what they can do whenever there's sophomores and juniors coming up. And I do think Aaron Henry's the guy. I think it's just a loss of talent and just trying to figure out who you have and what position might fit the best. Because Gabe Yakis, he's moving from offense from the linebacker position to interior defensive line next year, more than likely. So I think that kind of fit and those kind of puzzle pieces are going to start to fit together better next year.
Sure. And then lastly, what's just something maybe casual football fans or maybe just Gopher fans that don't get to watch the Illini as much? What's something that their defense is actually better at than maybe that we wouldn't maybe pick out just from looking at the stats leading into the game?
I mean, I think you'll see what Jerzon Newton is as a player in this first half when he's not going to be on the field because he got a targeting ejection call in the Wisconsin game in the fourth quarter. So he is out for the first half of next week's game, of this Saturday's game, pardon me. And whenever he's on the field in that second half, you'll see an immediate click of change of what that defense can look like. So Jerzon is going to be a first round NFL pick, and I think he's going to be so exciting to watch on Sundays. He reminds me a little bit of a Gerald McCoy kind of style of player. So if you're not an Illini fan, if you're not a Minnesota Golden Gopher fan, it should be really fun to watch the difference between the first half and the second half of that defensive line for Illinois.
Yeah. All right.
Nice.
Anything from you for on the Gophers offense?
Absolutely. I'm not even going to try to say your quarterback's name. I'm just going to call him
Ethan
the Greek Gopher.
Kaliakmanis. Yeah, there you go.
Ethan Kalakamanis. Okay. It reminds me of Georgi Bashanishvili of Illini basketball a few years ago. But what are your guys' thoughts on his progression as a passer throughout the time he started out in Minneapolis versus now?
Go ahead, Spence.
You know, well, I'll say this. Last year, we had a veteran quarterback, Tanner Morgan, and he went down due to concussions. And looking at Ethan go, he looked great. He looked like he was going to kind of fill in those shoes this season and kind of take over the offense. This year, first game of the years, I think that stayed consistent. Against Nebraska, he throws the ball 40 plus times. He looks pretty good. Game winning touchdown at the end of the game. And then it seems like the coaches kind of took the keys away from him. We started running the ball like we traditionally do, 30, 40 times a game. And as a young quarterback, I feel like he wasn't really given the opportunity to kind of develop, by throwing the ball, 20 times, maybe 30 times a game. He didn't really get that opportunity. And I feel like as a result, when we do need him to make some throws or when we do need to get some pass plays, we haven't really seen that. And I feel like that stunted his growth overall. I do think that he is a great quarterback. I think that he has, the ability, he has the size, the body for it. I just think that we need to see more play calling, that is tailored towards him and a lot of the receivers that surround him. Um, Iowa, it's hard to do that against, an Iowa, defense that's one of the best in the country. I didn't really expect him to go off or anything like that. Michigan State, I feel like it was a little better. I mean, statistically, he did great. Couple of bad throws, I thought. One bad interception. But other than that, I think that those are kind of growing pains. I think hopefully, during this game and for the rest of the season, we kind of see an opportunity for him to throw the ball a little more and to grow by the end of the season. And so I'm confident he'll continue to be our guy at quarterback, and we'll just have to see how this season unfolds.
Freshman
Yeah.
Darius. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the only thing I would add to that, it's the frustrating part I think for Gopher fans is just with the new offensive coordinator calling the plays. It's tough to tell right now if it's more of Ethan's struggle or the play calling struggle. And I would agree last game was a bit of a step improvement as far as accuracy throwing the ball down the field. But I think there is a little bit of pressure on Ethan just to perform these last games of the season, just to see if if he doesn't kind of continue to progress, then I think PJ will have some pressure to go out and try and find somebody in the portal. But that was all I was going to add in there.
Freshman Darius Taylor, he is the leading rusher for your Gophers, 591 yards, 4 touchdowns. How has that carry distribution evolved from the start of the year to now?
Well, it's weird because if PJ finds a hot hand, he's just going to ride that out as long as he can. So Darius Taylor, true freshman, like you pointed out, didn't play at all really in the Nebraska game, first game of the year. He got 1 carry. Played a lot against Eastern Michigan and then against North Carolina, and just kind of just came onto the scene as being the guy. So really, he was the only one getting carries for the most part in that stretch before he got hurt, which has leaned us, onto Zach Evans, who then Zach Evans got all the carries before he got hurt against Iowa. And now they're both kind of banged up. So PJ tends to ride the hot hand, as you saw this past week with our 5th string running back, Jordan Newman, who got 40 carries. But that's always been PJ's philosophy, is he's just going to ride the hot hand of the running back no matter who it is. So, but Darius Taylor is very talented. We're very excited about him. We hope he can go this game. Not sure what his status will be, but when him and Evans are healthy, I think you'll probably see ideally like a 60-40 mix between those two, and maybe a little less from Evans, and you might mix in like the maybe the Newbin now or Sean Tyler if he can not fumble the football. But ideally, I think PJ would like a 60-40 split between our top 2 guys.
You look at the young secondary for the Illini, and how are the targets for the Greek Gopher going to be distributed throughout the game, do you think?
Well, I think right now the guy that they try and force feed, if anyone, is Daniel Jackson. Receiver number 9 leads the team in receptions and touchdowns and yards. He's a terrific player, was a 4-star out of Kansas when he came here and just done nothing but really improve and really taken over the number 1 spot this year. So they have a few plays drawn up for him. Gopher fans actually kind of like overall our receiver room this year compared to years past. Corey Crooms is a graduate transfer we got out of Western Michigan. He's got some speed to his game and a lot of experience out of the slot. We found him a few more times this past game against Michigan State, so we'd like to see that continue. But Daniel Jackson is the guy where they're going to be like, okay, like we're running a slant to Daniel Jackson on this play. This play is going to be an out and up. He seems to be the player that the passing game really like works through. And if he gets taken away, then it's kind of a mixed bag as far as what we can do through the air.
Spencer,
I agree.
Spencer, what would you say your biggest pet peeve is about this Gopher offense?
I feel like this would go a few ways. I think that the easy answer would be, I think, like Kurt said, distribution of the ball. I mean, running the football 40 times is the reason why we're on our 5th string quarterback right now. Or I'm sorry, running back right now. You know, you have a great running back out of Darius Taylor, freshman. He's been beat up since Northwestern, which was a bye week and a couple games ago now, a few games ago now. You look to Zach Evans, another freshman quarter or running back. He got hurt as well. Bryce Williams, he's like a, I don't know, six year senior right now.
Yeah.
He's out for the season. I mean, everyone's going down, and I don't blame him. When you're running the ball 30, 40 times a game, you're going to get beat up, and you're probably going to, go down with an injury. So I wish we would throw the ball a little bit more. I guess another thing to tack onto that is, and I wouldn't necessarily blame this on coaching because he hasn't been doing that well this year, but we had a preseason All-American tight end, out of Brevin Ford. I mean, he's got the size, he can block, he had hands, but this year he hasn't been playing that well. And, to his defense, we haven't really been utilizing him that much or in a way that I would like to see him. I mean, he can do it all. But the problem is when we do actually try and find him, it seems like he either drops the ball or there's some miscommunication or something. So, and if you know PJ, if you can't do anything with the ball or if you can't be trusted, he just won't go to you. So I have a feeling we're probably not going to see him in action as much for the remainder of the season. Kind of like a Sean Tyler. He fumbles. He has got a fumble problem. He's probably going to be on the bench for the remainder of the season. So I guess those two things, just distribution of the ball, in terms of running and throwing the ball, and just not getting a mix in with our All-American tight end, though he has kind of brought it on himself.
Kurt, it's back to you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I would just add is I think the conservative nature of PJ, which is what bothers me for the offense. He just kind of willingly will step in and say, we're running the ball here. Like last game, we had a 3rd and 5 from Michigan's 11 or 3rd and 7 from Michigan State's 11-yard line. We ran the ball up the gut for a 1-yard gain and just settled for a field goal, and we were down. I think it was 6-0 still at that point. So that would be my biggest pet peeve is PJ's willingness to just step in and just say, nope, we're going to run the ball regardless of the situation there, just to guarantee at least 3 and limit the bad plays, I guess. But so I think we could be a little bit more aggressive. Switching things over here, Illinois' offense. They still look tough to me, like a physical team out there to me when I watch them. I'm just wondering, does the rushing offense struggle? And I think you maybe alluded to it when you first talked. Is it the O-line that's just not performing, or does this team miss Chase Brown more than they were expecting?
I think it's kind of twofold. Reggie Love and Josh McCray weren't really the guys to take over. But I think they've found, kind of like Minnesota has in a true freshman, Caden Fegan. I think he is the future for Illinois football. He's a guy that came from small class 1A football for Illinois high schools. And he's come in and just been a battering ram, 67 carries, 329 yards, 2 touchdowns. And he falls forward at all times. Like nobody just pushes him back. He's always falling forward, gaining an extra yard, gaining an extra 2 yards, really playing that Brett Bielema identity up in what he wants out of a running back. The offensive line has slowly started to gel just a little bit, getting guys in right places, but it's still just not good enough in a Brett Bielema offense, and I think that's why they're going to go to the portal next year. But I feel like the rushing attack of Caden Fegan has kind of stabilize this Illinois offense, even with the loss to Wisconsin. They still beat Maryland, and they were leading against Wisconsin through 3 quarters. So I feel like things have started to simmer in the just craziness that was going on with the Illinois offense that happened earlier on in the year.
Sure. How would you evaluate your quarterback's play so far up into this year?
I think Luke Altmaier will be the guy moving forward. He has 2 years, I believe, of eligibility after this year, and there was some time that he needed to just work through some things. But his wide receivers do not get separation at all outside of Isaiah Williams. Pat Bryant really struggles with separation. Casey Washington just really suffers to get that separation to help Luke Altmaier out. So there's constantly a defensive back right up in their wide receivers' grill. So it makes Luke Altmaier's job so much more difficult. So you got to rely on some quick slant passes. You got to rely on the screen game of Isaiah Williams. And I just want to see some of those young freshmen that Illinois, young sophomores and freshmen that Illinois got in the wide receiver room to kind of help Luke Altmaier out, but they still have yet to be on the field to make that contribution because they can't pass up Pat Bryant and Casey Washington.
Sure.
Obviously, I'm not in practice, so I don't know what is going on there, if they struggle with run blocking in practice or if they are just not ready for the prime time yet. So,
Right.
uh, questions to be asked in the future for this wide receiver room, but again, the portal is there.
Yeah. You mentioned him already, but Isaiah Williams is second in the conference, only behind Marvin Harrison Jr. in yards and catches. Um, just one thing that stood out was he does only have one receiving touchdown. Do you think his usage just drop as you get closer to the red zone, or what's the story behind that?
I mean, speed kills in those first 80 yards, and in the last 20, a lot of depends on speed. A lot of depends on the play calling, and I feel like the rushing attack of Luke Altmaier, who uses his legs quite frequently, and the running game. I feel like that's kind of what Barry Lunny Jr., offensive coordinator, has kind of relied on whenever it gets to the red zone. And Isaiah Williams doesn't really have those red zone style tools to make him successful, but he'll help you get there. He just won't
Sure.
finish the job for you. But he is one hell of a player and just a speed demon, just a guy that can be used in a multitude of different ways. This is a guy that started out as a quarterback at Illinois and has developed into one of the top 5 wide receivers in the Big Ten. So it's been fun to watch.
Yeah. Um, what would again kind of the same thing for your offense this time around? What's something that the Illinois offense does well that maybe they don't get enough credit for right now to the outside fans?
I think it has to do with Luke Altmaier's legs. He is a guy that will tuck it and run, even though that's not really what you want to see too much, but he has the ability to move. He has 301 rushing yards on the year. That's second most on the team. And pairing him with Caden Fegan, a guy Luke Allmeyer could go to the outside, or you can just do a handoff to Caden. I feel like it makes the defense have an extra check. And I feel like that's going to really help out against a team like Minnesota.
Yeah, his legs definitely worry me as far as watching
Yeah.
previous Illinois games. Shorty, any other questions you want to get in here?
No, I think that addressed it, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like Kurt said, that's worrisome that he can tuck the ball and run. That's one thing that Gopher defense kind of struggles at. Quarterbacks that get out of the pocket, it seems to it's been killing us this year. So hopefully that can be limited.
What has Minnesota been struggling with the most on defense?
I would say you know, I feel like they've definitely picked it up since the bye week. These past two games, they've done great, but I do think, again, it's containment. I think that they've been struggling with particularly mobile quarterbacks, just kind of containing them and keeping them in the pocket. Once it showed all season. Once they kind of get outside, they're good for 4 or 5 yards, and it kind of keeps the drive going. Against Michigan State, they made a quarterback change, seemed like he could get out of the pocket a little more. They went down and scored a touchdown. So that's something that could be worked on. Um, Otherwise, I think that, right now, maybe our secondary, I guess. There's a lot of great players, but it seems like there's been a little miscommunication. I think it has to do a lot with some of our linebackers, too, just kind of getting in the spots where you're needing to get to once the snap is made. Um, I think that they've improved throughout the season. Again, lots of new guys. Star linebacker Cody Lindenberg was hurt for the first half of the season, and so a lot of guys had to step up and fill those shoes, and they were big shoes to fill. Thankfully, he's back, and I think he should be back for this game. But I think just like kind of learning this defense, this Joe Rossi defense, and just containment have been the biggest things, and I think that they have improved over the past couple of games.
Yeah, if I'm Illinois' offense, I'm targeting our linebackers in the passing game, and then also the opposite safety of Tyler Nubin. That's been, I think, the biggest weakness that we've struggled with on defense is giving up big chunk plays in the passing game, and part of that is to the containment, like Spencer said. But these young linebackers who have played most of the year, it's taking them the longest to kind of tighten up on their zone coverage drop back. So that'll be interesting to see what Illinois does to attack that.
I'll go with Kurt on this one. I don't really know when to ask this, but Illinois has struggled with being the more disciplined football team in terms of penalties, in terms of turnovers. How has Minnesota done in terms of the penalty battle, game to game, and the turnover battle?
Yeah, for the most part, I think they've done very well in both. I was kind of a weird one just as far as penalties goes because we had a very undisciplined series on defense that led to Iowa's only touchdown in the game. But outside of that, I can't think of a time the defense was getting penalties that were costing us, drives
Yeah.
or being the main fault of our series. And then the takeaways, I think we're tied. I think we're fourth or third in the Big Ten, I believe, in interceptions right now. So we've been getting more takeaways this year for sure. A lot of that's because Tyler Newman and Justin Wally have been living up to their potential that we thought they had as Gopher fans. And but Wally got banged up at the end of Michigan State too, so it will be interesting to see. But as far as discipline goes, and not taking penalties, I think we've been pretty solid at that so far.
We all know Tyler Nubin is a special talent, but what makes him the special talent, Spencer?
It's a great question. I think that it's just his ability to tackle, I think, is really good. But also, it seems like he's just kind of a ball hawk. I feel like, especially this year, he's around plays, it seems like. There have been a few breakdowns this season that, he's been, I think, responsible for. But I just think that, he fights for the ball, he has some interceptions, and he's just physical. And I just think that's what makes him just this all American safety. And we're going to miss him, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's kind of given free reign a few times of what he wants to do out there. He kind of gets to go just be a playmaker, which is fun to watch.
Kurt, looking at this defensive line of the Gophers, who do Illini fans need to watch out for on that front four?
Yeah, I'm gonna cheat and take two, but Jaw
Okay.
Joyner off the edge. He's probably the one that still I'd say gets the most consistent pressure. PJ likes to rotate his D linemen. I don't blame him. They're pretty good this year compared to what we've had in the past. There's no, Jer'Zhan Newton out there, but Joyner off the edge is good at getting to the quarterback. I wish they subbed him out less, but it is what it is. And then Devin Eastern, who's a redshirt sophomore, really his first year of getting significant playing time. He's really came on the last couple weeks of being that interior guy that can just cause disruption and kind of push guards back into the quarterback's face a little bit. So those are the two guys that I feel like have been standing out the most for this front four.
I'm kind of done with my defensive questions, but an overarching question of just the Minnesota program. How have you liked what PJ Fleck has built in Minnesota, and where can he improve going forward? I'll start with you, Spencer.
Another great question. You know, I think that he has recruited probably the best that I have seen in my lifetime. There's definitely talent that he brings into this football team. And I do think, he's kind of like this eclectic coach. He's not like everyone's coach, but I feel like to be a part of his team, you got to kind of really, be all in on it, sign up for it. And, you have to be a part of that camaraderie and that culture. And I think that buy-in kind of builds, I guess, team chemistry, if you will. Outside of that, I think that one thing he could work on is I think he's more of that culture kind of coach and kind of unites men, gets them to kind of drink the Kool-Aid, if you will. I don't think he's that good at the X's and O's of football. Kind of like Kurt was saying a little bit before, he has this really conservative nature. He'll run the ball 40 times if it's working. And you shouldn't go away from something that's working, but we should see a little bit more from, the offense. You have a guy like Ethan Kaliakmanis who seems to be a good quarterback, and you have a lot of great weapons around them. Why not use them more often? Kind of see what this offense is about. And so in these big time games, when you need to rely on something else other than running the ball, you have reps to do that and you can make some big plays. So I kind of wish that he would kind of steer away from that conservative nature and just kind of see what talent he has that he's assembled around his football team.
Yeah, not a whole lot to add. I think his game management has been questioned by fans for a while, as just takes a lot of odd timeouts and just seems to kind of panic a little bit at times as far as when to take them and when to let the clock run. Um, like I said, like we were down 3 scores to Michigan at the end of the first half, and we had the ball. And he talked about how he was worried about giving them the ball back too soon. Like if we weren't to pick up a first down there, it's like you're down 3 scores, man. No one's expecting to win this game. Just go out there and try and score some points and make it a game. Get back in the game. So just stuff like that. He is pretty reliant on his coordinators, because he's not the X's and O's guys as far as what game plans we come up with and whatnot. But yeah, overall, I've been pretty happy. It's the most consistency we've had in our lifetime at the Gopher program. So definitely want him to stay. Like he says, just change his best, but definitely not on the fire PJ bandwagon of that. We had some Gopher crew chanting after, say, the Northwestern and Michigan game. But yeah, no, overall, I like him.
How has Minnesota done in the NIL space, Spencer?
Oh, I think, Kurt can talk to this as well, but my perspective is, here in Minnesota, we have a great Fortune 500 kind of, businesses around the Twin Cities here. You got Target, Best Buy, just to name a couple of them. Um, Unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, we have all this big times professional sports as well. You got NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL. We got a soccer team. You got everything. So I feel like the love is kind of spread thin throughout all of those professional sports. what I don't want to say thin. It's spread through that, and then college is kind of just like the leftovers. So I feel like it definitely could be a little better. I mean, if that was the focus here in Minnesota, I mean, there would be so much money available to these athletes. And I think in turn that would recruit a lot of special talent, not just in football, but all of the Gopher sports. So it's an area of improvement. I don't know how that gets improved. I don't know, Kurt. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely getting better. Like you said, there's a lot of donor potential out there, but if we're being honest, there's a lot of lukewarm Gopher fans where it's not their
Yeah,
top thing, it's not their top buy-in. So you need a stronger fan base uh, to get that support from a lot of those big donors. So um, that's why it's very important for Minnesota to stay consistent, which is why I'm happy with what PJ's doing. But they've recently launched like this beer now that's being sold at the stadium and that you can buy pretty much anywhere around the state. They're coming out with other products that you can buy that go to the NIL collective. So they're definitely starting to get there to where I think they'll be able to keep up with, like the Illinois and Iowas and Wisconsin, like in that realm. As far as what Michigan and all them are going to bring in, that's a different story where you'll need to get a little bit more. You probably need a few more special seasons to get more hype around the program before that really would ever happen. But it's improving. That's what we can say about it.
That's all I got.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into it then, fellas. The line has moved. The Gophers opened up as a 4-point favorite. They're now a 2-point favorite. I'll go into my little notes here I have about the game, and then just my prediction. So Newton being out in the first half, as we mentioned for the Illini, going to be huge. Last year, Illinois held the Gophers to a total of 180 yards and just controlled the ball. They had the ball for 40 minutes. Um, I think without Newton, the Gophers will be able to move the ball a little bit more. At least I'm hoping in the first half and be able to score just enough points and then maybe kind of sit on the ball and wait out the Illini in the second half. We've been pretty good at not turning the ball over, taking out last week. We had 3 turnovers last week against Michigan State. So keep holding on to the ball on offense and taking advantage of no Newton. I have the Gophers winning a tight one, 20-19, beating Brett Bielema for the first time. We're 0-9 all time against Brett Bielema.
yeah. I have to agree with everything Kurt said. It's really it helps the Gophers a lot that Newton's out, for the first half. But kind of talking about defensive line, I hope that the Gophers up front will kind of have a great game, put pressure on the quarterback for Illinois, and kind of make sure that he's throwing the ball, kind of force those throws, and maybe generate some turnovers off of that. Win the turnover battle, be physical, and then try and keep the penalties at a minimum. I think will be important as well. Gophers, like Kurt says, have not beat Brett Bielema ever. 0-9 to him. I think this year, in light of the recent win against Iowa, these curses are just kind of going to fade away this year. So, with that being said, I think the Gophers will win this one 21-17.
And I would just be ripped if I didn't add this in. The health of Justin Wally and Darius Taylor will be very important as well. Will they be able to play
Yeah.
this game? I think. I'm just guessing. Wally's gone down and come back a lot this season, so I'm going to assume he's back. I don't know. It will for sure help covering Isaiah Williams if he is. He's their top corner. And I think Darius Taylor might be getting close enough to give us some carry. So I'm assuming those two things happen in my prediction.
I'm going with you guys in terms of the final outcome. It's going to be a win, but I have a little slightly lower scoring game for Illinois and Minnesota. I think it's going to be 17-13, Minnesota winning over Illinois. I just don't know if Illinois has 2 pure touchdowns in them to make this score a little bit more competitive. So I think Illinois will run the ball pretty well. I think the passing game will continue to struggle, especially against a guy like Tyler Nubin. And then that first half of losing Jerzon Newton is just soul crushing to even start the game, knowing that your best player can't be out there for the first half of the game. So I have Minnesota winning 17-13.
I think the last time everyone picked the Gophers was was the Northwestern game. I could be wrong on that, but I'm hoping we didn't just jinx the Gophers here in that situation. Austin, do you just want to give your plugs here and let everyone know where they can find you in your podcast?
Absolutely. You can find me at AB1132 on Twitter, and you can find us at Illinicast on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple, and on Twitter itself, or X, whatever we're calling it nowadays. So
Sure.
at AB1132 and at Illinicast.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Again, this was your big banter crossover episode between Sky U Pod and the Illini Cast. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.